From starvation to freedom. The incredible transformation of Rosie the horse. Rosie, a horse who once carried herself with strength and grace, stood alone in a barren, desolate field. Her coat, which had once shone in the sun, was now dull and matted, clinging to her thin, fragile frame. The vibrant energy she had once known was gone, replaced by an eerie stillness. Her ribs jutted out from beneath her skin, sharp and pronounced, a cruel reminder of the hunger she had endured for far too long. Each breath she took seemed labored, as though the weight of her suffering was pressing down on her chest, making it harder and harder to stay on her feet. Her once strong legs trembled under the strain of carrying her emaciated body. She had no strength left, no energy to run, to play, or even to stand tall. The world around her was silent, save for the rustling of dry grass that whispered in the wind. There were no other animals, no comforting voices, no one to care for her. She was a solitary figure, forgotten by time and by those who should have protected her. Rosie had been left alone in this forsaken place, a patch of land that seemed to mirror her own despair. She was surrounded by nothing but dust and dry earth, with no shelter, no pasture, and no care. The few blades of grass that dared to sprout in the field were too sparse to sustain her. The land offered no hope, no relief. Yet, despite her misery, she did not give up. There was a glimmer of life that still remained in her, a spark of hope buried deep within her weary heart. She was desperate, yes, but she had not yet given in to the suffocating weight of hopelessness. Days turned into weeks, and Rosie's desperation only grew. With every passing hour, the hunger gnawed at her insides, making her weaker and weaker. She would stand for hours at the edge of the field, her eyes searching the horizon, hoping for some sign of help, some indication that her suffering was about to end. But each day that passed brought only more pain, more emptiness. Her body, once strong and full of life, had become a skeleton wrapped in skin. She had no energy to move unless it was necessary, and even then it was a struggle. The weight of her hunger was so overwhelming that she no longer had the will to fight. She had learned to survive on what little the land provided, but it wasn't enough. It would never be enough. In her search for food, Rosie had even resorted to putting her head through an electric fence. Her instincts told her there might be something beyond it, something that could feed her, but all she found was pain. The electric shock jolted through her body, a cruel reminder that there was nothing else to offer. She could taste the faintest trace of grass on the other side, but it was out of reach. Nothing seemed to help her, no matter how hard she tried, no matter how far she searched. The loneliness was almost as painful as the hunger. No one came for her. No one even noticed her suffering. She was nothing more than a shadow in the distance, a faint memory of a horse who had once known joy. But that small, flickering spark of life in her eyes refused to go out. Even in the face of insurmountable odds, Rosie held on. She had known a better life once, and that memory, though dim and distant, was enough to keep her from surrendering to the darkness that surrounded her. It was a painful existence, one that seemed as though it would stretch on forever. But fate was about to change for Rosie. The world had not forgotten her, and she would soon find out that there was hope waiting just beyond the horizon. Someone was coming to rescue her. A person who would see the desperate animal she had become and give her the chance she so desperately needed. It was time for Rosie to begin her journey back to life. And though the road ahead would be long and difficult, it would lead her to something she had almost lost faith in: happiness. After weeks of suffering in silence, Rosie's fate finally took a turn. As the sun began to set one afternoon, casting a golden hue over the barren field, the distant hum of an approaching vehicle could be heard. It was a sound that Rosie, too weak to even lift her head, could barely register. But to the sharp eyes of the rescuer, it was a sign that something was about to change. The vehicle came to a stop just at the edge of the field, and the door swung open. Out stepped a kind-hearted woman, her face filled with compassion but also concern. She had heard about Rosie's condition from the local animal rescue group, and the moment she saw the horse in person, her heart broke. She had seen suffering before, but there was something about Rosie's empty, tired gaze that tugged at her soul. Without hesitation, the woman walked towards Rosie, her every step filled with determination. She knew what she had to do. Rosie needed help, and she wasn't going to leave without making sure that help was on its way. As she got closer, Rosie lifted her head just slightly, the smallest movement, as if she sensed that someone was finally coming for her. But the weakness in her legs kept her from standing up. The woman knelt beside her, gently stroking the horse's thin neck. Her touch was soft, but it carried a promise of safety, comfort, and food. Rosie's eyes, once empty and distant, seemed to flicker with a new sense of hope. There was someone here. Someone cared. The rescuer reached into her bag and pulled out a bundle of hay. Rosie's nose twitched, and in that moment, it was as if the earth had stopped spinning. The smell of food, a small thing, but to Rosie it was everything. She hesitated, unsure whether to trust this person or to believe that something good could actually come from this. But the hunger in her belly drove her to finally take a cautious step forward. She nuzzled the hay, her teeth tearing into the soft strands with eagerness, her body trembling with the first true nourishment it had received in far too long. As Rosie ate, the rescuer continued to speak softly, reassuring her that everything would be okay, that she would no longer have to suffer alone. The woman could feel the weight of Rosie's exhaustion, the toll it had taken on her body and spirit. But as Rosie ate and began to regain some of her strength, the rescuer knew that this was just the beginning of the healing process. In the days that followed, Rosie was transported to a safe and loving environment, a sanctuary where she would be given the food, care, and attention she so desperately needed. But even as she stepped into this new life, Rosie's journey was far from over. The road to recovery would be long and challenging. There were so many wounds to heal, not just on her body, but deep within her heart as well. She had been abandoned, forgotten, left to suffer for too long. But now, she had a chance, a real chance, to find the happiness that had been stolen from her. The decision to help Rosie wasn't just about saving a life. It was about giving her the chance to experience love and care once again, to feel the warmth of kindness and the joy of running free in a field, something that had seemed impossible not so long ago. The rescue was more than just an act of kindness. It was the beginning of a beautiful transformation, one that would touch not only Rosie's life but the hearts of everyone who witnessed it. The transformation of Rosie was not an overnight miracle, but rather a journey, a long and patient process that unfolded one day at a time. At first, Rosie was fragile, her body still a stark reminder of the abuse and neglect she had endured. She had suffered for so long that every new step toward recovery felt like a small victory, yet the road ahead was still uncertain. It was as though the healing of her body was only the beginning, and the true transformation lay in restoring the spirit that had been lost in the darkness of her starvation and isolation. For the first few days at the sanctuary, Rosie's world was different. No longer did she have to search for food. No longer did she have to endure the constant pain of an empty stomach. The shelter was filled with lush green grass and fresh hay, and there were warm, friendly hands offering her comfort and care. The moment she was brought into the pasture, Rosie seemed unsure at first, looking around with cautious eyes, as if she couldn't quite believe that this new place could really be her home. The world had been cruel to her for so long, and the concept of safety, of kindness, was foreign. But soon she began to adjust. The first few meals she had were consumed eagerly, her eyes wide with a hunger that had gone unfulfilled for far too long. Each bite seemed to bring more life back into her, each moment of nourishment slowly breathing vitality into her body. Her ribs, once painfully prominent, began to fill out, and the dullness in her coat started to give way to a softer, more lustrous shine. It wasn't just her body that was healing. There was something more profound happening. There was a lightness in her step that hadn't been there before, a spark in her eyes that began to flicker with the curiosity and joy of life that had been missing for so long. The rescuers were patient with her, understanding that healing would take time. They watched as she started to trust again, slowly but surely. At first, she was hesitant to be touched, her body stiff and nervous whenever someone approached. But with time, The gentle hands of those around her soothed her. They spoke to her softly, never rushing, always letting her take the lead. It wasn't long before Rosie began to seek out their presence, nudging them gently for affection, her body slowly relaxing in their care. The trauma of her past was deep, but love and kindness were the antidotes she needed. As the weeks went by, Rosie's physical transformation was nothing short of astonishing. The thin, brittle frame she had once known was gradually replaced by a stronger, healthier body. Her legs, which had been weak and unsteady, began to carry her with newfound strength, and her coat, once dull and unkempt, began to gleam with a rich, healthy shine. The transformation was visible to everyone around her. Rosie was becoming a new horse, inside and out. But it wasn't just her body that was changing. Her spirit was beginning to heal too. She began to express herself more, her playful side emerging as she trotted around the pasture, her tail flicking in the air as she enjoyed her newfound freedom. She would pause now and then to look back at the humans who had saved her, a gentle nudge or a soft whinny of gratitude. She had learned to trust again, to open her heart to those who had shown her kindness, and in return, she gave them her loyalty and affection. Perhaps the most powerful moment in Rosie's healing came one afternoon when she was allowed to run freely in the open field. It had been so long since she had felt the freedom of open space, the thrill of the wind in her mane, and the joy of just running without fear. When Rosie took her first full gallop across the pasture, it was as if all the pain of her past was left behind in the dust. She ran with such grace and speed, her body now strong and full of life. The pasture echoed with the sound of her hooves, the joy of her freedom reverberating through the air. It was a triumphant moment. Rosie had found herself again. The transformation wasn't just about the physical changes, but about the restoration of a spirit that had almost been broken. Rosie had been saved not only from hunger, but from despair. She had found hope again, and it was that hope that fueled her healing. The love, care, and patience of those around her had given her the chance to heal and become the horse she was always meant to be. By the time the weeks had turned into months, Rosie had become a living testament to resilience and transformation. Her once skeletal frame had been replaced by a powerful, beautiful body. Her coat was now rich and thick, her eyes bright and full of life. But it wasn't just the physical changes that spoke to the depth of her healing. It was the joy in her every movement, the way she had learned to trust again, to love again, to be a horse once more. Rosie's transformation was a reminder of the incredible power of compassion. It showed that no matter how far gone a creature might seem, there is always hope. With the right care and love, even the most broken souls can heal, and even the most starved bodies can flourish again. Rosie's journey from starvation to strength was a profound testament to the power of second chances. And it was a story that inspired everyone who witnessed it. After months of healing, the day had finally come. Rosie, once a shadow of her former self, was ready to experience a freedom she had not known in far too long. The sun shone brightly in the sky, casting warm light across the pasture where she had spent the last few weeks regaining her strength. The air was crisp, the grass swayed gently in the wind, and for the first time in a long while, Rosie's heart felt light. Her transformation had been nothing short of extraordinary. She was no longer the weak, starving horse who had been left to suffer alone in the desolate field. She had become a symbol of resilience, a beautiful, powerful creature whose spirit had been reborn. But today was different. Today was the day she would experience the joy of freedom, the freedom to run, to play, to truly live. The rescuer stood by the gate, watching Rosie as she trotted around the pasture, her eyes bright and full of life. Rosie had grown accustomed to her presence, seeking her out for affection, and the bond between them had grown strong. But today, there was something new in Rosie's behavior. She was pacing back and forth, her ears flicking forward as she looked toward the open expanse beyond the fence. It was as though she could sense that something monumental was about to happen. With a smile, the rescuer opened the gate. Rosie hesitated for a moment, as if unsure whether to take the step that would change everything. The freedom before her was both exhilarating and daunting. But then, in a burst of energy, Rosie made her decision. She stepped forward and trotted through the open gate, her hooves tapping against the ground with a rhythm of anticipation. As Rosie crossed the threshold of the pasture and into the open field, something inside her seemed to shift. The world was suddenly bigger, brighter, and filled with possibilities. The open space stretched out before her, unbroken and endless. For the first time in what felt like forever, Rosie was free to go wherever she wanted. There were no more fences, no more hunger, no more pain, just the vast expanse of freedom. And then she ran. With a joy that could only be felt after having known true suffering, Rosie took off across the field, her powerful legs propelling her forward with grace and speed. Her mane flew behind her, dancing in the wind, and her tail streamed out like a banner of triumph. She galloped with the kind of exuberance that could only come from the deepest parts of her soul. Her heart full, her body strong, and her spirit soaring. The grass beneath her hooves seemed to part in welcome, and the wind that once felt harsh and unforgiving now felt like a sweet embrace. Rosie was no longer just surviving. She was truly living. As she ran, her laughter echoed in the freedom of the wide-open space. She leaped into the air, her hooves kicking up dust as she spun and twisted, reveling in the sheer joy of being alive. It was as though the entire world had opened up to her in that moment, and she could feel every inch of it. The warmth of the sun on her back, the coolness of the breeze, the earth beneath her hooves. She was alive, and it was magnificent. The rescuers watched in awe, their hearts swelling with pride and emotion. This was the moment they had worked so hard for, the moment when all the pain and hardship Rosie had endured faded into the past. She had finally found her happiness. She had earned it, and now she was experiencing the joy of living fully and freely. As the hours passed, Rosie continued to run, her energy boundless. She took breaks to graze on the lush green grass, but every so often, she would gallop across the field once more, just because she could. The joy was infectious. Every movement, every step, every leap was an expression of pure, unrestrained happiness. Rosie had become the horse she was always meant to be, the horse who would never again know hunger or despair. But the climax of her freedom wasn't just in the physical act of running. It was in the way she carried herself, in the confidence that radiated from her. She had been given a second chance at life, and she was determined to embrace it fully. The horse who had once been starved and abandoned had become a living symbol of transformation, resilience, and the power of love and care. The field stretched out before her, but the horizon was not her limit. The joy in her heart, the happiness that flowed through her every step, was limitless. Rosie had found her freedom, and in that moment, she knew she was exactly where she was meant to be. Free, happy, and truly alive. The sound of her galloping echoed across the field, a triumphant melody that marked the beginning of a new chapter in her life. Rosie had found her freedom, and it was more beautiful than anyone could have ever imagined. This was her moment. This was her victory. As the sun began to dip lower in the sky, casting a golden glow over the pasture, Rosie slowed her pace, her breath coming in contented, steady bursts. She had run until her body was tired, but her heart was full. She trotted back toward the humans who had been watching her every joyful leap with smiles on their faces. The rescuers were standing at the edge of the field, their eyes brimming with tears of pride and emotion. They had seen the transformation, not just in Rosie's body, but in her soul. She was no longer the broken horse they had first met, the one with hollow eyes and a fragile body. Rosie had found something that had been missing for so long: peace, joy, and love. As she approached them, Rosie's steps were steady, her head held high. She nickered softly as she came closer, nudging the rescuer's outstretched hand with affection. In that moment, it was clear that Rosie had found her place in the world. She wasn't just surviving anymore. She was thriving, and she knew she had a future, one filled with love, care, and happiness. The pasture had become her new home, but it was so much more than just land. It was a symbol of everything she had fought for. It was a place where she could be herself, where she could experience the joy of running, of playing, of being part of a family again. The humans who had rescued her had promised to give her the life she deserved, and now they were doing just that. They watched as Rosie happily grazed on the lush grass, occasionally lifting her head to look back at them, as if to say, "Thank you." Her days were now filled with the simple pleasures of a healthy, happy life. She spent her mornings exploring the field, basking in the warmth of the sun, and the evenings were filled with the quiet sound of her gentle whinnies. Rosie had found a family, not just in the humans who had saved her, but in the other horses who roamed the pasture with her. She had friends to run with, and every moment of her new life seemed like a gift. The rescuers continued to care for her with the same love and dedication that had brought her to this point. They made sure she always had the best food, the softest bedding, and the attention she needed to continue thriving. They spent time with her, giving her all the affection she had been denied for so long. And Rosie responded in kind, always seeking them out for a scratch behind the ears or a gentle nuzzle. The bond between them had grown stronger each day, and Rosie's trust in them had deepened. She had finally learned that love could be unconditional and that she deserved it. But perhaps the most beautiful thing about Rosie's new life was the way she had transformed not only physically but emotionally. The shy, wary horse who had been afraid to trust had blossomed into a confident, affectionate creature who loved freely and without reservation. Rosie had learned that kindness and compassion were not things to be feared, but things to be embraced. And in return, she gave her rescuers a love so pure, so true, that it could never be measured. As the months passed, Rosie's healing continued. Her coat became shinier, her eyes brighter, and her muscles grew strong and firm. She had gained weight, but it was the strength and vitality that made her truly beautiful. No longer did she look like the starving horse who had once clung to life. Now, she was a vision of health and happiness. Her body reflected the transformation of her spirit, and every time she looked into the eyes of the people who had given her a chance, she was reminded of how far she had come. One day, as Rosie stood at the edge of the field, her gaze fixed on the horizon, it was clear that she had truly embraced her new beginning. The past was behind her, and the future stretched out before her, full of promise and hope. She was a survivor, and she was living proof that no matter how dark the past, there is always a chance for a new beginning. Rosie's story was not just one of survival. It was a story of triumph, of transformation, of the incredible power of love and care. She had found her place in the world, and it was more beautiful than she could have ever imagined. The once starving horse who had been left to fend for herself had become the horse who now radiated joy in life, a symbol of resilience and hope. The journey Rosie had taken, from starvation and despair to health and happiness, was a testament to the power of second chances. It was proof that with compassion, patience, and a little bit of love, a broken soul could be healed, and a new chapter could begin. And as the sun set on that peaceful pasture, Rosie stood tall, her heart full, knowing that her story was just beginning. The story of Rosie was one of hope, resilience, and transformation. A beautiful reminder that even in the darkest times, there is always the possibility of a new beginning. And for Rosie, that beginning had just begun. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a warm orange glow over the field where Rosie stood, her coat shining in the fading light, it was clear that her journey had come full circle. From the depths of suffering and neglect to the heights of health, joy, and freedom, Rosie's story was a testament to the incredible resilience of the spirit. It was proof that no matter how dark the road may seem, with love, care, and compassion, transformation is always possible. Rosie had not only overcome physical hardship, but she had also healed emotionally, learning to trust and love again. Her story reminds us all of the power of second chances and the incredible impact of kindness. She was no longer just surviving. She was living, thriving, and enjoying every moment of the beautiful life she now had. Rosie's transformation is a symbol of hope, a shining example of what can happen when we choose to care, to act, and to give the love and support that every living being deserves. It's a reminder that each of us has the power to make a difference in the lives of animals, just as Rosie's rescuers made a life-changing impact on hers. So, as you watch Rosie run free in her new home, Remember that every animal deserves a chance at happiness, just like she did. You, too, can be part of this transformation. Whether it's by adopting, fostering, donating, or simply sharing stories like Rosie's, you can help provide second chances for animals in need. If Rosie's story touched your heart, please consider supporting rescues and shelters who are out there every day working tirelessly to give animals like Rosie the love and care they deserve. You can make a difference in their lives, and with your help, more animals will have a chance to experience the joy and freedom that Rosie now does. Remember, just like Rosie, every animal has the potential for a second chance. Together, we can make the world a kinder place, one rescue at a time. Thank you for being part of Rosie's journey and for helping to create a better future for animals everywhere. Please share this video to raise awareness, and if you're able to, consider supporting local rescues. Together, we can give more animals the life they deserve.